Something a little bit different for you today, folks. As some of you all know, if you follow me on Twitter, I am currently knees deep in the Autism Show tour. I was down in London talking last weekend. I'm going to be in Birmingham this weekend doing a talk about my autism diagnosis process, which we're now about 4 years deep into. A few of you have asked if that talk is going to be made available anywhere. Short answer is no, not really. So what I thought I would do is just do the talk here. Obviously, I know the talk. I'm the one who wrote it and talks it. So this is an at-home sitting in a chair version of the talk that I'm currently doing at the Autism Show. If you are coming to Birmingham at the weekend, feel free to come and watch it again. There's a Q&A afterwards. I don't want to scare people off from... I like to have a big crowd. And it seems very weird doing the intro here on YouTube and saying into the camera, "Hi, my name's Kevin Chapman," because I kind of assume that everybody watching the channel already knows who I am, but I guess it serves as a pretty decent reintroduction to the channel. I am Kevin Chapman. I'm a YouTuber and streamer, and previously, goodness me, did I do many things. Trying to go back in reverse chronological order, I was a teacher, a professional poker player, an insurance salesman, a mortgage advisor, estate agent, self-employed financial advisor. I was a business development manager. I worked as a bank clerk. I sold shoes. I've written books. I do podcasts. I've done lots of things. I kind of have this thing throughout my career where I've never done any of those jobs for more than a couple of years at a time. I do them for a couple of years and then move on to something completely different. It's a theme that we're probably going to loop back round to a little bit further into this talk. But what I'm going to be talking to you about in this video is my autism diagnosis process so far. I say so far because as of right now, at the time of recording, I am not formally diagnosed with autism. I am pretty comfortable self-diagnosing and referring to myself as an autistic person here on the internet and at the Autism Show. But 4 years after first starting to explore the possibility of an autism diagnosis, I still don't actually have a formal one. But why on earth was I exploring this in the first place? We need to jump into the time machine and travel back to small Kev. There you go. Are we all picturing small Kev now? Even when I was little, I always knew I was different from the other children. My mum always used to refer to me as hyperactive. I don't know if that was a formal diagnosis she got from a doctor or just something she decided that I was. Unfortunately, she passed away 17 years ago now, so it's not something I've ever actually been able to ask her. But what I do know is when I went to my friends' birthday parties, I was never allowed to have the full sugar or the caffeinated pops. And there would always be a little bit of a warning about Kevin can be a little bit boisterous whenever I went anywhere and did anything. So I was always, like I say, always a little bit different. Fast forward to slightly bigger Kev. I'm at university now, and I met Sheepdog. And if you follow my stuff, you're probably vaguely aware of who Sheepdog is. He appears in the background of these vlogs quite regularly. He does my podcast with me. He was on the panel with me at Comic-Con recently, the Neurodiversity panel. And when me and Sheepdog were at university together, again, we knew that we were a little bit different from everyone else who was on our course. In fact, we used to refer to ourselves as having broken brains. We didn't mean it in a derogatory way. It was kind of like a self-deprecating humor thing. It had not occurred to either of us that there might actually be something medical and diagnosable there. We just thought we were a bit different, a bit weird. We were the nerdy ones who got the best grades in the course and thought it would be fun to drive around the UK, finding the best thing from every county and recording a podcast about it and then writing books about it. And when we got nerdy about something, we got proper nerdy about something. Interesting to note that Sheepdog has now had his formal autism diagnosis. Read into that what you will. And then towards my end of my time at university, I met Anna. Again, if you're a regular watcher of the channel, you know who Anna is. She's my partner. We met about 10 years ago. And at the same time as meeting her, literally the same day I met Anna for the first time, I met her son, Andy, who at the time was 7. Again, you'd have seen a lot of him over the channel over the years. But he was really my first exposure to the word autism. In fact, when me and Anna were first starting to talk, before we'd even met in person, we were firing messages back and forth to each other on eHarmony. And she mentioned that she had a son and that he had ASD. Now, as you do, I'm kind of just nodding along, going, oh, yeah, all right, okay. And of course, as soon as we finished our chat, I'm there on Google typing in what is ASD. Found out it stands for Autism Spectrum Disorder, a term I was completely unfamiliar with. So I then went down a rabbit hole of learning about it. The fact that I'd made it to my late 20s, not really knowing that term, is one of the reasons why I push autism awareness so hard now, because I consider myself a pretty smart guy, well educated, well informed, and I'd managed to make it through until 29 years old, not knowing what autism is, not knowing the word, not recognizing the initials ASD. It's one of the reasons why I push awareness so hard, because that shouldn't be a situation that can happen in this day and age. So I've now discovered this new term, autism, ASD, and it has sent me down one of my typical rabbit holes. Whenever I have a new thing that I'm interested in, I disappear down rabbit holes. I become obsessed. I read all the books. I watch all the videos. I become an expert in that thing. And this is the process that I went through with autism over those first couple of weeks of having met Anna. While all this was going on as well, I was finishing off my computer science degree and starting my teacher training, the 1-year extra course that I did at the end of my degree. And by this point, I'd gone so deep into this as my latest research obsession that I ended up doing my teacher training dissertation on education of children with autism. To give another example of a rabbit hole, the year before, while I was still a professional poker player, my computer science dissertation was all about poker and developing software as a poker strategy thing. Again, whatever is currently the thing that is a bee in my bonnet is the thing that I go all in on with the research. But again, I was constantly leveling up my understanding, my expertise in this new shiny thing called autism. And would you believe that something strange happened as I started to learn more about autism? Believe it or not, I started to see more and more of myself in the things that I was seeing. Is this a familiar story for anybody? This seems to be something that a lot of parents go through when their kids are going through the diagnosis process. I just happened to be a little bit later because Andy was already diagnosed by the time that I met him. I never really had a light bulb, I am autistic moment. It was more a bit of a drip feed of things that I noticed. For example, social skills. I've never really had particularly good social skills, which seems like a weird thing for me to say in a YouTube video where I'm talking quite confidently and fluently and making eye contact with the camera. And this is a version of a talk that I am doing currently in front of loads of people on a stage at an event. And it's this fluent and this coherent there as well. And it's all fine. But the difference is I understand this. I get this. I know how it works. I know when I do this at a show, I've been given 20 minutes where I can talk and no one else is allowed to, because they don't get the microphone for the Q&A until I'm ready for them to have the microphone for the Q&A. Here on YouTube, I know that I can just talk until I hit end on the camera, and then we can have a discussion in the comments. This isn't a two-way interaction. This is me communicating my ideas to you, and I am good at that. Anyone who's ever met me in public, whether it's walking around a convention or just noticing me in the street, whatever it might be, I've met hundreds of you over the years, and you'll have seen a different side to me. I've got a few nicely scripted lines that I will always use. I'll always ask you your name. I'll ask if you're having a good day at whatever event you're at. I'll happily pose for a selfie. But once I've gone through my normal routines, my normal scripts for the social interactions, what generally then happens, and anyone who's met me will be able to confirm this down in the comment section, because generally what happens next is I kind of just stand there waiting for you to take the lead, because I don't really know what to say next. I don't really understand small talk. And like I say, this is a talk that I'm doing at the Autism Show at the moment. And if there's one place where that waiting for someone else to take the leads becomes awkward fast, it's the Autism Show, because there's me waiting for them to take the lead and the autistic person I'm speaking to waiting for me to take the lead. And it pretty much is an exchange of, hi, how you doing? How you having a good show? Here's the selfie. And then we stand there and look at each other for a bit until one of us walks away. And that's how like 80-90% of the exchanges I had in London last weekend were. And I don't know how to not do that. I don't know how to stop that from happening. Social stuff, like I say, always been a nightmare. Another example, I don't really have any friends. I'm not in contact with anybody I went to school with. The only person I still know from university is Sheepdog, who I mentioned before. And I mean, really examining that relationship, the only reason we're still speaking every week is because we do a podcast together every Friday. We don't really communicate very much between those two podcasts. We're not texting, we're not calling each other. I do wonder if we didn't have that podcast as a reason for us to talk once a week, would we still be in contact? I don't know. I'm not very good at making friends, keeping friends, maintaining relationships. I think my autism, my autistic traits have a lot to answer for when it comes to the breakdown of my first marriage. Now I look back at some of the things that went wrong there, and now I can put a thing to them. I can understand some of the things that I did that were perhaps unusual, unexpected, weird. I get it. I do understand that probably led to that breakdown. I'm also terrible when it comes to emotional stuff. I mentioned before that my mum passed away a long time ago now. I've still never cried about that. I'm sad about it. I wish she hadn't died, but I've never cried about it. Did I cry during Endgame when Captain America said Avengers Assemble and Falcon appeared next to him and all the other Avengers started to appear? Yeah, of course I did. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it now, and I've done this talk multiple times. I know that line's coming, and even still, I'm getting the goosebumps. I can't explain it. Emotional stuff for me, it doesn't make sense. I wish it worked the way it did for everybody else, but it just doesn't. It's not how my brain is wired. And I could go on and on and on. There were so many signs that I think if I was a kid now growing up, it probably would have been noticed by a professional. But this was I went to school in the late 80s, early 90s. It wasn't something that was noticed, particularly because I always did pretty well in school. I was a smart kid. I wasn't particularly disruptive. If I did mess around a little bit in class, it wasn't at the expense of my work. I was always near or at the top of my class. I got good exam results. I had good attendance. There wasn't anything for anyone to worry about, so nobody did worry. Nobody looked into the fact that I didn't really have any friends and I had these weird little obsessions, and that kind of stuff was kind of swept under the carpet because the stuff that is supposed to be going well at that age was going well. I didn't need any help. But of course, when it came time to entering the world of work, I hadn't had the help earlier on. It had never been flagged up to me that my brain might be working differently to other people's. And I kind of fell into this habit of, like I said before, getting a job, becoming an expert in the job, getting bored of the job, leaving the job, starting again somewhere else. And this went on and on and on. Like I said before, never had a job for more than 2 years, which meant I never had consistent pension contributions. You know, I never had the stability that you look for as an adult in employment. Luckily, this job I have now is one that I've been doing for a long time and is kind of built around my needs, and I haven't got bored of it yet, but I can tell you for sure, Anna is in constant fear of me waking up one day and just deciding that I'm bored of YouTube, I'm done with YouTube. She's almost expecting it because she's seen it happen with a couple of things before. I also think my autism has an impact on the relationship that I have with the girls. Though, again, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you will know I have 2 children from my previous marriage who don't live with us. Amy is still young enough to come and spend time with us every couple of weeks. She comes here every other weekend. Lucy, we catch up with every now and again. She's 20 now. She's an adult. She's off doing adult things. But when they're not with me, I'll sometimes go days, even weeks sometimes with Lucy, where we just don't have any contact with each other. It doesn't occur to me to send them a message, give them a phone call, unless I'm prompted to, unless I'm reminded. It's like, yeah, that would be a nice thing to do, but it's not. For some reason, my brain, it's almost as if because they're not here, I need prompting to, it sounds horrible to say, but to remember they exist. And it's a horrible thing as a parent, probably for the kids to hear, and it's not deliberate, and I wish I could be better at keeping in contact with them, but my brain just doesn't work that way. As I'm sure you'll have noticed in videos from time to time as well, the house is always untidy. I'm just terrible at keeping anything tidy. I'm not good at cleaning, to the point where cleaning and tidying, it goes into the category of a job that I'm done with, or just anything that I see as pointless. If I don't see the benefit of doing something, then it becomes physically painful to do that thing. Like if I had to go and do the washing up now, knowing we had a dishwasher, I would really physically struggle to do it. I would feel that tension building up in my arms, where I just want to throw my arms out and just really burst some energy out of my system. I'd want to smash up the plates. I can feel the tension of the thought of doing it now is horrible. I do not like to do things that I see as pointless. If I think there's something better I could be doing, I would always prioritize that thing, which often comes at the detriment of some of those things that you have to do, like making sure you've got clean clothes to wear, making sure that you've got clean plates to use, that you've cooked a healthy meal, that you've planned meals and done the shopping. All these little day-to-day things I do struggle a little bit with. Now, I don't struggle in the same way as Andy does. Andy needs day-to-day support and supervision to keep him safe, to make sure he eats at all, to make sure he can't prepare his own food for himself. He can't choose appropriate clothes for himself. I understand I don't need support at that kind of level. And I have made it to very close to 40 years old without really having any additional support. And again, you could make that same argument that was made when I was a kid at school. I'm doing okay. You know, I'm doing pretty well in life. I don't need the support. I'm doing fine. And that in itself can become a little bit of a problem, because it would be quite nice to be able to say to friends and family, look, I am autistic and these are some of the things you can expect from me. Don't take them personally. And maybe sometimes I'll need you to take the lead on our relationship a little bit, just to prompt me to do some of those normal things. Or if I don't return a call, return a text, doesn't mean I don't care, doesn't mean I'm ignoring you. It might just mean I saw it, I was doing something else, I forgot. Maybe send it a second time. Maybe the onus will be a little bit more on you to call me a little bit more often. Maybe my house will be untidy. Just to be able to explain, and this is why. I would love that. That would be a really useful thing for me to have in my life. So about 4 years ago, I started the diagnosis process. I even made a video on the channel at the time. I did an online autism test. It was very early on in the process, just to see, and that came back and said, well, yeah, you are. Obviously you are. And whenever I talk to people about potentially looking for a diagnosis, the response was always, yeah, that seems about right. Surprised you didn't already have one, that kind of thing. So about 4 years ago, I went into the doctor for the first time to ask about it. And I did everything textbook. I did everything that you're supposed to do when you go to the doctor to get your autism diagnosis, because the GP can't diagnose you. You have to go through a referral to somebody else, a specialist. So I went onto the NHS website, the National Autistic Society website. I downloaded this long list of all of the potential autistic traits and symptoms, circled everything that I felt applied to me, added notes to it, giving examples of how each applied to me, several examples for each one. I went into the doctor armed with a little folder full of probably 10, 15 sheets of paper with all of this information. I went into the doctor thinking it was a foregone conclusion I was going to get that referral, sat down in front of them, and they completely threw me with one question I wasn't prepared for, because they didn't seem interested in why I thought I was autistic. The thing they were focusing on was why I wanted a diagnosis. How would it change my life? How would it impact my life? And I didn't have an answer. And because I didn't have a good enough answer to that question, no matter that I had all of this evidence that I was autistic, they sent me away, because they were of the opinion that if it's not going to change my life, what difference does a diagnosis make? There's no point just getting the piece of paper. If I don't need access to benefits or carers or amendments to be made in my job or whatever else it might be, they basically left me with the impression it was a waste of time getting a diagnosis, because nothing would change. So I got sent away. And after I was sent away, I spent another number of months putting together basically a version of the speech that you've heard so far. That is my why, my explanation for why I wanted a diagnosis, and eventually got back round to going back to the doctors again. And this time I had the answer that I just gave you. And obviously it's the right answer, because that time I did get the referral to the specialist. And I was only in there a few minutes. They said, yeah, that's fine. We'll refer you on to a specialist. You should hear from them whenever. You know, it's a long process. It's not going to be next week, but at some point you should hear from a specialist. So again, sent home to wait, and wait I did. And eventually a nice lady in Cambridge phoned me and said that she was the autism specialist, but of course there was a but she didn't do it for the NHS. She wasn't actually an NHS doctor. she was a private doctor who could only give me a diagnosis if I paid for it. I think the price was around about £1,400 to pay for an autism diagnosis through this lady. But she did emphasise the fact that it should be possible for me to get a referral to somebody within the NHS. The first port of call shouldn't need to be for me to go private. So she recommended that she refer me back to the GP, and the GP then re-refer me back out to an NHS specialist. She also mentioned that if I paid for a private diagnosis, which she said she would have been happy to do, but she did ask me to bear in mind sometimes a private diagnosis isn't even taken into account when it comes to applying for things like benefits or support or anything like that, job changes, because it can sometimes be seen as just buying the piece of paper. Some services will only take an NHS diagnosis. So she recommended if I could get an NHS one, I should, and she'd only come back to her as a last resort. So I was referred back again, which of course adds more time to the process. And between that referral back to her and going in to see the GP for a third time, I got a list of specialists off the National Autistic Society website. I got a list of all the specialists in our area who were in the NHS who I could be referred to. I went into the doctors again, armed with that this time, explained the conversation I'd had with the lady in Cambridge, and the doctor said, yeah, that's fine, that's really helpful. I'll take this, we'll get these referrals off. You should hear from these in no time. And it was around about then that I was booked to do this talk, the Autism Show talk. I was booked onto the Autism Show 2020. We all know what happened between the appointment I had with the doctor where they were doing my referrals and the Autism Show 2020, scheduled for June 2020. The pandemic happened. Of course, the pandemic happened. And all of a sudden, all non-essential medical stuff was delayed or cancelled. And somewhere along the way, I just got lost in the mix and never heard from any of those specialists. I'm guessing the reason I never heard, and I didn't just hear late, is because about 6 months into the pandemic, we also moved house. Anna got a job in a different part of the country. We moved for Anna to do that job into a different county where we live now, which meant me changing GPs. So probably 6 or 7 months after I'd had that conversation with the GP where they were redoing my referrals, we moved here and I changed GPs, and I never heard back from those referrals. So if they ever did come back, they probably went to the old GP and they probably said, he doesn't live here anymore, don't worry about it. So we were then kind of stuck in that pandemic limbo that lots of people got stuck in for lots of things. And I kind of started to buy into the idea of the NHS has probably got more important things to be doing at the moment. I'm not going to press the issue until they're able to have the time to see me again. So I just kind of left it and then got invited to come and do the Autism Show 2022. And that kind of prompted me to think, well, I still haven't got the diagnosis. I need to restart the process. Should I restart the process? And it was only then, like January, February this year, when I was invited back to the Autism Show this year to basically do my talk about my adult diagnosis process. I said to Connor, the guy who organises it, I haven't got one. I still haven't got one. I don't think I'm going to get one. I don't think I need a formal diagnosis anymore because other things had changed since I started the process. 3 years previously, 3.5 years previously, when I first went to the GP, I had all those reasons why I wanted the diagnosis. I wanted to have an explanation for why I behaved the way I did, why my brain works the way it does. I wanted to stop feeling imposter syndrome. I wanted to feel part of a group, if you like. I wanted the piece of paper. I really wanted it. But other stuff had happened. I mean, I'd been talking for 3 years on the internet about how I was autistic. I'd stopped saying I might be autistic. I'm showing some autistic signs. I've got some traits. And I just started self-diagnosing. I started calling myself autistic. I did the Autism Show in 2019. I took the neurodiversity panel. We took that to Summer in the City, the biggest YouTube event in the UK. We took it to the third biggest Comic-Con in the world, London Comic-Con. I've now moderated the neurodiversity panel for 5 London Comic-Cons in a row. And for every single one of them, I've sat on stage and introduced myself as autistic. I'm really comfortable saying it now. I am autistic. I don't feel as much that I need the piece of paper anymore. So I haven't restarted the process. I haven't gone back and got it because one of the things that we talk about on the neurodiversity panel is how valid self-diagnosis is. And I completely agree. I have been through doctors doubting me and questioning me and throwing up barriers. And I don't know that I want to do it again. I don't know how getting the piece of paper would change my life, because I'm in a very lucky situation. I'm self-employed. I set my own hours. I have my own work environment that is set up to suit me perfectly. I don't answer to anybody at work. Anna obviously is an expert in all this stuff. She's been Andy's mum for half of her life. If anyone understands autism, it's Anna. So she cuts me an incredible amount of slack. She understands that if I'm sat in this room for hours on end, it's not because I'm bored of her or I'm avoiding her. It's because I'm focused on whatever I'm doing in here. She'll sometimes pop her head around the door and remind me to drink water or take a break, but she won't expect me to drop everything and come and watch telly with her or drag me around the shops on a Saturday afternoon. When I go to the Autism Show, when I went last weekend, she knew that because I was going to be drained having done that on the Saturday, she knew I'd need rest on the Sunday. I'd need to recuperate. And she makes so many accommodations for me that I don't think I necessarily need any support on that side of things. My kids, they're older now. They understand that my brain works differently from a normal dad. They understand I'm autistic. They know it's not me being a monster. And they text me and they call me and it works and it's fine. And I genuinely don't know at this point what difference it would make to my life. So at the moment, I'm not pursuing a diagnosis. I'm happy to self-diagnose and I'm happy to stand here on the internet and go, I am autistic, and feel comfortable doing it. I don't feel like an imposter saying it anymore. That being said, some of that might change. I'm not saying I'll never go and get the formal diagnosis. And I might go and get it in the meantime, just in case any of these things happen, because I am aware that at some point, this cushy job that I've got for myself could go away. People could stop watching my YouTube videos. I might have to go back and get a real job again. And at that point, it would be quite nice to maybe make some accommodations. I don't want to go back into the cycle of doing a job for a couple of years, completing it and moving on to something else, because that's no way to set up a secure future, a secure life. Anna might get bored of me. Anna might get sick and need looking after herself. I might get sick and need looking after. You know, anything could change relationship and family wise. And I might have to learn to fit into the normal world a little bit again, because I live in my own little autistic bubble where the only people I associate really are neurodivergent, and my whole life is built around making everything a little bit more comfortable for me. And that might not be there forever. So I'm not saying I'm never going to go and get a diagnosis. The whole purpose of the talk has gone from being, this is my autism diagnosis process. It's changed into, this is why I'm not going for it now. But for a lot of you, maybe you probably should, if you feel like you'd need some support. So that's my story. It's not really over yet, but they wanted me to come and do the Autism Show anyway. So it kind of stops there with a to be continued. And like I say, there probably will come a time where I go back and see the doctor again. But for the first time in a long time, for the first time since I started exploring all this, I'm not in any rush. I'll do it when it feels like the right time. And I'm pretty lucky at what I've managed to set up for myself and make life work for me, and not force myself to fit into certain aspects of life. So that's pretty cool. And it's at that point I start asking for audience questions and we do the audience interaction bit, which obviously we can continue down in the comments section. If you enjoyed this kind of content, let me know down in the comments. I can do more stuff like this. Whenever I go to an event like the Autism Show, or I do the neurodiversity panel, wherever that might be, I always feel like I should probably talk about this kind of stuff more, because people always come and tell me how valuable this kind of conversation is. And I do feel a bit of a responsibility to talk about it more. I've got to keep reminding myself that it doesn't necessarily matter so much that not many people click on it, because the people who do click on it, it matters to them and it makes a difference. So let me know. If you've got questions, ask them. If they're easy questions, I'll answer them in the comments. If they're harder questions, they might even become videos in their own right. But for now, I will wrap this up, because I think it's probably been a long one. I think because the camera is on, I've probably waffled on for a little bit longer than I would have done when I did it in person. I've fleshed some of the points out a little bit more. And Chris is going to have fun jump cutting this for every time I'm looking down, checking up my notes. So thank you for watching. I'll see you again very soon with some more normal content on the channel. And yeah, good hit.